Hi everyone. For various reasons, we will start the chapter straight away today, and I'll tell you later on why we're doing so. So this is Thornyhold, chapter 14, by Mary Stewart. The year drew on into a lovely autumn. The days went by bright and still, or with a breeze that lifted a few leaves from the trees. The horse chestnuts turned first, a rich golden yellow, then the cherries to scarlet and saffron and jade. No frosts as yet. In the garden, asters and chrysanthemums smelled rich and sweet. I found autumn crocus one morning just beside the front door, and on the garrier against the north wall, the grape-bloomed catkins were beginning to lengthen for winter. I had never worked so hard physically in my life, and had certainly never been so happy. My luggage came, and with it the furniture and household effects that I had kept from the vicarage, so before these could be arranged, I started on the promised turn-out of the house. Drawing-room, den, dining-room, hallway, I swept, scrubbed, polished. One day Jessamy Trapp came up with his mother and offered to climb up and clear the roof gutters. Agnes came 2 or 3 times with renewed offers, insistent ones, of help, so that I began to wonder if she needed the money, and in the end set her to scrub out the old kitchen and back premises, and then, I'm afraid with intent, to do the same for the pigeon loft. To do her justice, she did the jobs well, but it seemed that the pigeon loft was enough. For after I had thanked her and paid her, she did not come back, and I was left in peace. At length the house, scoured, polished, and smelling of autumn flowers, was as clean as it would ever be. I spent 2 or 3 satisfying days rearranging the rooms to accommodate my own things, leaving the picture hanging, always a slow job, till the last. I had rehung most of the pictures from the hall and drawing-room after cleaning them, but had kept 1 or 2 aside to make way for my own flower studies I had done some time ago, which my father had thought good enough to frame. These, I thought, might go well enough with Cousin Gaylis's pictures, which were all watercolours, pretty things, the sort you can live with. Her taste had been conventional and gentle. All her spirit and energy, it seemed, had gone into her care for garden and still-room. One of her pictures intrigued me. It was a tinted drawing, very much faded, of Thornyhold seen from the belvedere, its south front bare of creepers and climbing plants, looking vaguely unfamiliar. The garden, too, was different, with paths cut in curved lines through the close-mown grass, and flower-beds crowding between. The enclosing hedges were barely breast-high. There was nothing surprising about finding a view of the house, done many years ago, but what aroused my curiosity was the signature, a monogram of a G and an S entwined. Gaylis Saxon? She had surely never seen Thornyhold when it looked like that. She could not even have been alive at that time. Then who? Not another Gaylis. That was too fanciful. But the very fancy stirred something in me that had been forgotten for too long. Studying the ordered lawns and shrubberies of the old Thornyhold, I felt myself seized, for the first time since my school days, by the old longing to paint. Not to be an artist, no ambitions after London exhibitions or dreams of vast canvases hung on gallery walls, but a desire to record some of the beauty around me, to put Thornyhold quite literally back in the picture. I would start this very week, and soon, when my hand was in again, I would tackle the same view of the house as I had seen it, recognized it, with so much love on that first day, and with the work somehow stake my own claim to Thornyhold. Meantime, the garden, like the house, must be brought up to order. William had come from time to time, as he had promised, to help me with the garden. Between us we got the front strip weeded and tidied for the winter, and made a start on the kitchen garden and herb beds. Most of Cousin Gaelis's harvest would be wasted, because I knew very little as yet about the picking and drying of her plants, but I could deal with the pot herbs, and brought in rosemary and sage and thyme and the sprigs of sweet bay, and hunted out the jars for my bramble jelly. There was no orchard fruit to gather. If the traps had taken it during the interregnum, that was fair enough. But there would be wild blackberries in plenty. If I could lay hands on Cousin Gaelis's famous recipe book, I might find new ways of using what was left of the garden produce. But search as I might, I found nothing except an ancient volume of country recipes, collected years ago by the local Women's Institute. Whatever was special about my cousin's preserves would just have to be missed. The jams and jellies in the W.I. book made luscious enough reading, and for the present would have to serve. So one beautiful day I gave myself a holiday and went blackberrying. William had given me rough directions: through the wicket at the side of the house, along the woodland path, then up a lane which was rutted but passable, and led eventually, he told me, to an ancient quarry set in pasture land. This, long since disused, was overgrown with blackberry bushes, and since it caught all the sun, ripened them beautifully. I tied a basket to my bicycle and set off. It was a roughish ride. It took me some 3 or 4 miles, but by road it would have been fully 6 or more. The afternoon sun shone down with real heat on the quarry, and the wind could find no way there. Rabbits fled at my approach, scuttling up the steep byways of the rock face to vanish among the stones. There was water at the quarry's base, a pool surrounded by fine, sheep-nibbled turf. The sheep, indeed, were still there, but moved off at my approach. Their dismal bleating echoed from the quarry cliff, and was answered loudly and sweetly by a robin's song. There was no other sounds. The wild thyme was still in flower, and here and there harebells hung motionless in the windless air. William had not misled me. The place was a mass of brambles, and the fruit was big and glinting ripe. I got to work. I'd almost filled my basket when I slowly became conscious that the bleating of the sheep had not dwindled with the flock's disappearance. One voice remained, steadily complaining, only faintly curious, but glad of a respite. I straightened up and looked around. No sign. The short turf by the water was inhabited only by a pied wagtail, making its darting runs after the insects brought out by the warm sunshine. The robin flew down to a bush nearby and whispered its musical undersong. From somewhere deep among the banked brambles, the sheep complained. And now that I was listening, there was more in the cry than idle grumbling. There was fear. I set my basket down and went to look. She was caught, like Abraham's ram, in a thicket of thorns. In trying to push through, she had brought a dozen hooked boughs down to fix themselves in her fleece, and when she had tried to pull herself out backwards, others had gaffed and netted her like a fish. She was immovable. She saw me, gave one last cry, and fell silent. I picked my way carefully in past the first barbed branches, and started to try and unravel her. It was an appalling job. I had no gloves, and to do the job without injury one would have needed heavy gauntlets of leather, and secateurs or even wire cutters with them, for as I tore each bough away from the sheep's wool, which took all my strength but did not appear to hurt the sheep at all, the bough tended to spring straight back and catch hold before I had reached for the next one, and each movement brought lacerations of hands and arms. I was scratched and bleeding freely before I gave up and began to scour the quarry, sure that somewhere some picnicker, careless of the countryside, would have thrown away a bottle or sharp-edged tin. I soon found one. Beside the remains of a campfire, near the pool, was a broken whiskey bottle. I started to hack the brambles through with that and haul them away, and in another 10 minutes or so it began to look as if the sheep could be moved. But I was afraid that once she found she could move, she might struggle away from me and trap herself all over again. "What on earth are you doing?" queried a startled voice, just behind me. I jumped and turned around. A man had approached, his footsteps soundless on the mossy turf of the quarry's floor. He was slightly above middle height, with darkish hair, showing a hint of grey, and dark brows over grey eyes. His skin was weathered to a healthy red-brown, and his clothes were workman's clothes, but his voice was educated. He carried a pair of binoculars slung over one shoulder, and in his hand was a crook. He must be the shepherd or the farmer. Relieved, I had just opened my mouth to speak when he repeated sharply, "What the devil have you been doing to that ewe?" I gaped, caught in my work of mercy. I had expected the shepherd to spring to my help, but he looked both startled and angry. "What the devil do you think I'm doing?" I answered tartly. Then, following his look, I saw what he had seen. My hands were bleeding freely, and blood had dripped and smeared over the animal's fleece, and in one bloody hand I held that most horrible of weapons, a broken bottle. I said rather feebly, "It's my own blood. Did you think I was cutting her up for a stew?" "Oh, my God, I see. But when you catch someone with a broken bottle in their hands and blood all over the place, I'm terribly sorry. Are you badly hurt?" "Not really. They're not glass cuts. I was using the bottle to hack these beastly brambles away. She was stuck fast, but she's almost out now, and I'm scratched to death. Can you help?" "Well, of course. You come out of that, and let me." He produced a clasp knife from a pocket, and then with the crook started to haul back the remaining bramble stems that trapped the ewe. Some of them he cut, then he handed the stem of the crook to me. "Hold them back with this, will you please, while I haul her out? If I cut them all at once, she'll probably bolt straight back into the thick of it." I took the stick and held back the bundle of thorns. He waded in among the remaining strands, then laid hold of the thick fleece with both hands and threw his weight back. She came, and as she came, she started to struggle wildly, but he held her, and finally yanked her clear of the thorns. In her terror, she fought to bolt back into cover, but he managed to turn her round and gave her a shove, till calling dismally she bolted, safe and sound, up the track where her sisters had gone. Apart from the bloodstains and a very ragged fleece, she seemed none the worse. "Well, thank you," I said. "Well, thank you," said the shepherd. "But for you, she might well have died there." "You'd have found her yourself." "As it happens, yes, but it was the purest chance that brought me this way." "Thank goodness for that. Even if I could have got her free, I doubt if I could have turned her. They're incredibly strong, aren't they? Here's your crook." He took it. "Now, your hands. How bad are they?" I held them out. "Scratches, but they'll heal." They've been bleeding so much that I suppose they'll be clean. Do you think the water's all right? I'd like to wash." I knelt down by the pool and washed the bloodstains off. The scratches were many and sore, but only one of them was deep. This was still bleeding, quite freely. He stood without speaking till I had finished, then handed me a clean handkerchief. I protested, groping for my own, only to find that I had none. "Take it," he insisted. "Look, returning it is no problem. I live just over the hill there. Come up now and we'll put something on those cuts, and I'm sure we can find some sticking plaster. Anyway, you'd like a cup of tea, wouldn't you?" "Well," I said weakly. "Did you get all the brambles you wanted?" "Just about. I can easily come back another time anyway." I regarded my hands. "I hardly feel like picking any more just this minute. Is this your land, by the way? Was I trespassing?" No, it's your public path. And in any case, the quarry would be common land. Before it filled up, I believe, the gypsies used to camp here. Let me take the basket." "Oh, I see you've got a bicycle. Will it be safe here if I come back the same way?" "I think so, but we won't chance it. I'll take it for you. We go this way, and it's pretty steep, but much the quickest." Wheeling the bicycle, he started off up the track the sheep had used. I followed. Once at the head of the quarry, I could see a low grey farmhouse set in its own shore of beeches, with a sprawl of outbuildings to one side. Rooks were loud in the trees, and cattle were gathering near a gate, where a farm road curled past the buildings and out of sight. "You can go back that way," he said, pointing. "The track you were on joins it just over that brow. You live hereabouts, I take it? Or are you on holiday? You can't have been here long, or we'd surely have met, and I wouldn't have forgotten that." His glance made it a compliment, and I laughed. "I haven't been here a month yet, but I think you probably know a fair amount about me all the same." "What do you mean?" I nodded towards the gate. A small figure slid through it and came running towards us. "Dad! Miss Galis!" "It was William who told me about the quarry and the brambles," I said. William's father scooped his son up under one arm and dumped him on the saddle of my bicycle. He regarded me across the handlebars. "So, you're on your witch," he said, smiling. And with that ends chapter 14. I've uploaded the next chapter as kind of a double feature with this one, and I would say that we should listen to both before we go into a discussion about these two chapters and what it brings about in the novel.